I'm out. Didn't take the bag.
Yeah, we need to start all over again, I forgot.
Oh, geez. I think when I took off the meeting break.
It was an interesting intermission.
We can start over.
Cause we forgot it.
Not as interesting. Like Henry, is it a drill?
Good job, safety officer.
I like how everyone laughs at me, but.
No, I love it. No, it's like the grown-up version of being the hall monitor.
Yeah.
Fire either. These are 20-year-old fire systems.
I'm not a safety officer. I thought you were cool for some reason.
Yeah, I
Yeah, we
wouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I got everybody out. Marie was hanging out and a few people and I was like, get out, it's not worth it. What part are we supposed to be here for?
What's that?
What part are we supposed to be here for?
The past ferry grant thing coming up, number 4B.
That's what I'm
That'll be
saying.
it.
We could have gotten the Dawson's out.
Alright, where's everybody?
I think everyone took a chance to go.
Is everybody, yeah, that's what I just did. Is anybody in a fire?
Looks like one man down.
One man down.
It's all right.
Waiting on Commissioner Scherer to return, then we'll reconvene.
He walks in everyone.
Exactly. Everybody enjoy the little diversion?
Yeah.
That's in school day. I think of Henry.
20-year-old fire system, you know, that's why we have it in the plan. Well, I think the alarm went right before Debbie was gonna say the increase in our union contracts and maybe the union pulled it. Okay, Maybe you pulled it. you're gonna help us lower the budget, right?
Oh, yeah, just.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and get underway. Commissioner Scherer can pick up when he gets back in here. Let's not hold up the wheels of progress any longer. Carry on where you were.
Okay. All right, well, I said to Al before we started this, I may put people to sleep. But apparently the alarm kind of helped. Get a little loud. So where we were talking about how insurances went up, transportation with our union contracts and Jolly Trolley contract, which James Bradford and I are gonna start really taking a look at to see if we can ramp that down, even though we have a contract in place. Mobility has increased significantly due to ridership. We've seen a big increase in ridership, especially with mobility on demand over the last 4 years, and a lot of that, you know, last year we tried to bring it in a little bit, which we're seeing through what I think Bonnie called guardrails or guide rails, to be able to keep the number of rides more reasonable for those, especially on mobility on demand. And of course, technology, we've seen that increase over the last 4 years with more software, increased software costs as things go to the cloud. So let's not forget revenue. We've just talked about all the expenses that have to be paid for from somewhere. The biggest piece of our revenue is our ad valorem, our property tax. That makes up about 67% of the budget. In fiscal '25, that number was 83.4 million. As I look to fiscal '26, based off of what Mike Twitty is saying, we're increasing it 2%. So hopefully we'll find out if that's a good solid number, whether it's more or less. And I don't know if anybody has more info. Yes?
Just a question, I mean, I know it's just a hypothetical at this point, but with the talk about getting rid of property taxes, what does that do?
That could be obviously a significant hit to our budget and a decimation of our system. I think, you know, what it'll hit first, transit is a tiny little sliver on your $1 of taxes. Where it's gonna hit first, which is where you're probably gonna hear the most, is police, fire, et cetera, on your tax bill. But that would decimate our system if we lost that at this point, unless it was replaced with something else. We also do use, as I mentioned earlier, some small portion of our federal grants for operations, for preventative maintenance. We do get state money for our routes, some of them, so that is about 21%. That also includes, as I'm whittling down the CARES Act, that still includes some CARES Act money. Prior to COVID, that number was lower. So what we've done over the years here since COVID at PSTA is when we got the big tranche of money, we swallowed the pig, but we made it into little tiny piglets going along there so that wouldn't hurt so much. A lot of our other agencies across the country are having major cuts in their routes, just the way they allocated their money way too heavy up front. They didn't wean themselves off of it. So we're using less and less and should finish that up in probably now 27. And of course, passenger fares make up 7%. With the help of the board last year, we were able to introduce things like Grouper, which is at a higher dollar amount than our normal ride. So that also helps to improve our fare box recovery ratio. Of course, the goal is always to have it, oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just, while we're talking about property taxes, I want you to know that many of us are elected officials here and that my constituents want to see property taxes come down this year.
All
So
right.
I'm not sure when you're planning, you might wanna count on the 83 million because I'd like to see the revenues from property taxes reduced this year.
Okay.
Not only am I get a lot of calls about that, I mean, my inbox is full of people screaming about property taxes. The governor's office is on me about, and the commission about lowering property taxes. If we don't get serious about it, maybe we will see the end of property taxes, so.
Well, I appreciate
Just
that
for your
input.
planning process, you might wanna think about, you know,
Okay. Well, we have to make sure we at least balance out without hurting the folks in the community, but I hear you, we lowered it just for this year.
no, I mean the take, not the millage rate, I mean the actual take, how much revenue's coming from property taxes needs to be reduced, not the millage
Okay,
rate.
that means we need to increase the others.
Hmm?
That means we need to increase the other ones.
Well, I have some
Reduce
ideas on that
expenses.
too.
Excellent, bring them
Good.
to me, bring
Oh, I
them to
got
the
them right
workshop.
here.
Excellent. We'll deputize you into the budget group, not a
Mhm.
problem. So as I mentioned, our goal is always to at least have a balanced budget, if not a slight surplus. This year we had about $187,000 that we had anticipated in the budget. Right now, and this is just preliminary, we are actually going through our budget meetings now with Brad. We've done some first rounds, we're in the second round with Brad. We're about $1.3 million off from where we need to be. As you can see, revenues are down, that's the issue. Right now, preliminary expenses are already down from what we budgeted in this year. So before we come to you next month, so in the next couple of weeks, I'll be coming to you with at least a balanced budget. So we're working on the expenses and I'll take the ideas on the revenues. So that's where we're going to be doing, taking a look at what we can improve here for next year, holding our expenses hopefully down so that we can meet this. So at the budget workshop, we're gonna have tables set up to talk about everything from the vision of public transit in Pinellas County, to ridership and revenues, cost efficiencies, how technology plays a role in cost efficiencies. As we get, I think it's maybe by the end of next week, we will have homework assignments for you. And we hope you take a look at it and do that, but if not, we will go through it together at the workshop. So keep all those creative juices flowing as we move forward. One of the last things I wanna say is there's something you can be rest assured of at PSTA, is we will try to make that dollar stretch as far as it can go. We're one of the most cost-effective transit authority compared to our peers in the country, and my anticipation is and definitely going to make sure we stay that way. And with that, I will take any questions. And we are
Questions?
replacing the 20-year-old fire alarm in the capital budget.
I don't see any hands up, so
All
thank you
right.
very much, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Now on to the action items. I need a motion to approve, from members of the finance committee, that is, the minutes of the April 16th minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a first, I have a second.
Oh, second. Sorry.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, interesting, the passenger ferry vessel grant. Brad and Darden, PSTA's Chief Planning and Community Affairs Officer, will outline the proposal and acceptance of grant funds for the passenger. Brad?
Good morning, everybody. Many of you probably remember at the last PSA meeting, Commissioner Scott asked that we this month have more discussion about this idea of PSTA taking over the HART ferry boat grant from HART. And we started putting the presentation together this morning to kind of address that. Last week at the PSTA Executive Committee, Commissioner Reed, you had some questions about trying to get some more specifics on the on how the funds would be used, and then what. So we've just sort of added some details on that and a little bit more numbers into the whole strategy behind how this grant could help lower costs, make the service much more efficient than it has been operating in the past. So we put this forward as an action item for the Finance Committee to consider recommending to the PSA Board in 2 weeks to accept the ferry boat grant from HART if HART approves the transfer. HART has asked the PSA Board to take this action to just confirm that we would accept the grant if they agreed to transfer it. Their Finance Committee approved recommended to transfer the grant to PSTA. There's no cost involved with PSTA accepting the grant. There's no cost to HART on this. And then, so the action item would be kind of a two-part with one vote to accept the grant if HART allows it, and then to use that grant to purchase up to 2 ferry boats for this service between Tampa and St. Petersburg. So I'm gonna kind of go through how we got here and then the strategy that we have behind this. And then Darden is going to sort of finish up with just some questions that we've heard from you, and I've briefed a number of the Hillsborough County Commissioners and HART board members, and then their questions, kind of put a sampling of those together to kind of elicit discussion. So the Cross Bay Ferry has been operating since 2017 for 8 years. And in 2021, there was an effort in Hillsborough County to run from South Hillsborough to MacDill Air Force Base. And they applied, Hillsborough and HART applied for a ferry boat grant from the federal government ferry boat program. And they got a grant for $4.8 million. But in 2023, Hillsborough County Commission voted to cancel that plan to go to MacDill Air Force Base. There was a lot of challenges with that, with the finding a good docking location down in Apollo Beach and with the Air Force Base, and they canceled it. So that allows, the ferry boat grant is unused, it's just sitting there. Hillsborough County has had a 5-year contract with this company called HMS Ferries that was supposed to end in September 30th of this coming September 30th, 2025. PSDA, Hillsborough County, Tampa, and St. Petersburg, the funding municipalities of the ferry, asked PSTA to take over the next contract. So we've been working with those partners on putting together an RFP for starting in October, to oversee the next contract, rather than Hillsborough County has been managing for the last 5 years. But then the company decided to take their boat back to Boston, and so Hillsborough County has just canceled their contract a little early, and the service discontinued on May 1st because they don't have a boat. Again, there's been a plan for a while now for PSTA with this experience to oversee the contract, the next contract for the ferry operations. My goal in putting this forward to the PSA board and for us is one, I have two goals. One, that there's no PSTA funding involved with this service at all. And two, that we can make it much more efficient and lower the cost for everybody and make it a much more efficient service. So the strategy would involve accepting this grant for the ferry boats and purchasing ferry boats that a contractor would then operate. Where we would set up an RFP, acquire the boats, lease the ferry boats for $1 a year to the ferry operator, and then they would have a contract with us to operate the service on a 10-year contract basis. The goal, and I'll kind of outline how this might work, is to lower the cost, the operating cost of the service, first by increasing competition for the RFP, second by providing the boats to a vendor so that they only have to pay for the crew and the fuel and the maintenance and the insurance, and then increase the ridership, which will increase the fares and offset even more cost to reduce the subsidies, possibly even eliminate the subsidies. The other benefit, and we were Debbie was just talking about this, Commissioner Hazelton, and you were asking about this. We could submit the miles and the ridership and all the data for this service, and that would generate additional capital dollars through that formula, that federal capital formula program. Those funds could be reinvested in the ferry program. They could be reinvested in buses or any possible use. But it would make the ferry service much more sustainable than it has been, relying on this boat from Boston. So this is the scenario that we are pursuing. We would issue an RFP this summer for the Cross Bay Ferry service between Tampa and St. Petersburg. If the PSA board does not vote for this, or if the HART board does not vote for this, then we'll still issue that RFP. We'll still issue the RFP, but we'll require the company to provide the boat as part of their cost. The cost will be very, very high, just as the HMS contract with Hillsborough has been very high. If the PSA board votes to accept this grant, if the HART board votes to transfer the grant, then we'll acquire the boats. We'll issue a slightly different RFP. Phase 1 of the RFP will be for the contractor to first identify the ideal boats for this service and have PSTA accept their proposal. And then second, they would acquire those boats, get them to the Tampa Bay area, and then they would lease them from us for basically a no-cost lease we would enter into with the company. Since the executive committee last week, we've done a little bit more investigation into the requirements. There's an issue with using federal funds for this, that the universe of boats that we can acquire, especially used boats, new or used boats, must meet Buy America. They must be made in the United States. It's likely that that might limit the market for ferry boats to other U.S. Ferry operations somewhere in the United States. There are boats for sale from other ferry operations in the United States, but I know I saw the one from Mexico for $500,000. I'm not sure if that's a American vessel. We've had a number of conversations with local operators of ferry services, Hubbard's Marina, Clearwater Ferry folks. I had some meetings last night with the St. Pete Dolphin Cruise owner, and there's general consensus that to purchase 2 of the kind of high-speed ferry boats that HMS was providing would be more two new ones would be more than $4.8 million. So it is very likely, I think it's gonna be necessary to purchase, if we want to get two, which I think that is the way to increase the ridership, is we would have to get at least one of the two boats to be used. It would have to be a used boat, probably even more efficient would maybe to get both of them as used boats, if that's possible. That would be phase one of the RFP. The contractor would have to identify the proper boats for use, and then phase two would then be to operate the boats. We have this model working successfully in Clearwater. Clearwater got the boats paid for by the state of Florida. The state legislature put an allocation and bought the Clearwater operator two boats. They bid to PSTA $87 an hour to operate that service, and that's what we're paying them to operate the Clearwater ferry. The Cross Bay ferry that Hillsborough County bid, again, they required the vendor to provide the boat. They put the crews up. The crews are also from Boston. They put them up and they pay for their hotels, they pay for their meals, everything. It's a completely turnkey, very inefficient contract. It actually is $600 and some an hour, but then they keep the fares, so it's $450 of subsidy an hour for that service. It's just a lot more expensive. If we accept this grant and purchase the ferry boats, it will be a much lower cost, lower subsidy program. So this is the scenario I have been describing. On the left is the current service, the way it's been operating under Hillsborough County. And then this is a scenario. Obviously, we're gonna issue an RFP, we're gonna take the lowest cost, so I can't guarantee that any of these numbers will be exactly the same, but this is a possible scenario. The current service, it's really $615 an hour. They operate 2,700 hours a year of ferry hours back and forth. It costs Hillsborough County and St. Pete and Tampa $1.7 million. They get about 60,000 riders on average. They've gotten 70,000 before. Sometimes with COVID, they were down in the 55,000. They collect 600,000 in fares. There's a net subsidy right now of $1.1 million a year that is paid for by Hillsborough, Tampa, and St. Pete. For a very limited service with one boat, they operate 3 to 4 times a day from St. Petersburg. And really, if you look at the schedule, they operate every 3 or 4 hours. There's only 3 or 4 times they go to Tampa. Same thing from Tampa to St. Pete. They go 3 or 4 times in each direction. Fast forward, a possible scenario under the plan where PSTA would acquire 2 boats and have the contractor operate those. The cost would be a lot lower. Now, whether we get to $87 an hour like Clearwater, I don't know, so I put in $250. It's a guess. Hopefully, if the vendors are watching this video, you will get lower than $250, please. Annual ferry hours could be double the service. That cost would be much lower, 1.3 million. Ridership would go up, the fares and concessions would go up, the subsidies would be cut in half. The annual subsidies would go down to 570. Recognize, and there's a number, I've heard from a number of board members, it's always important to look at the total tax subsidy, whether it's a federal grant, a state grant, or a local, it's all taxes, right? So even including the $4.8 million for the grant, if you add that in, and for 10 years of service, the plan, even with the boats acquired by the grant, is lower over a 10-year period under this scenario. And the service would be so much better. The service could operate year-round, every day, could operate every 1 to 2 hours in each direction. It would be a much more efficient, lower cost service. We can go over that, but I'd just like to introduce Darden to kind of go through the questions, yeah.
I have
answer
just a
questions.
real quick question on that last slide. You got, I thought we were planning on no subsidies for this and the operator's gonna take all that risk, but I do see a net subsidy number on.
We can, yeah, I have cut the, I, in this scenario, I cut the subsidy in half, from where it is now. We can certainly adjust the fares and concessions, we could get that number, very zero or close to zero.
Oh.
But-
Yeah,
Brad, I think you're talking about that net subsidy would come from St. Pete and Tampa.
yeah,
Right.
there would be
It's
no subsidy from PSTA.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's not county, that's not Pinellas or PSTA.
It would be up to them, what they wanna do, yeah.
Gotcha. Alright.
And if we could hold any future questions till the whole presentation is completed, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Darden Rice. I'm your Chief Planning and Community Affairs Officer. I just want to say thank you to all of our board members. You guys have put a lot of time into reviewing this action item, and thank you for that. And we have spoken with a lot of you at the committee level and individually, as well as to HART board members. And we've gotten a lot of great questions in response, so what we wanted to do was just really share those questions and answers with everybody to kind of help level set our general understanding of this action item. So the first question we get is, what is the ridership and the potential demand? Now, this was a pilot project that started in 2016, and as you can see on the graph, there's an overall upward trajectory of ridership with two notable exceptions. COVID, of course, and then when the city of St. Pete had to move the ferry location from the Vanoy Basin to the marina. Moving that St. Pete location back to the Vanoy Basin is definitely a part of the plan as we go forward. We know from ridership surveys that 70% of the ridership are locals, 30% are out-of-towners. A fun fact, the Cross Bay Ferry frequently sells out on weekends, even when there aren't lightning games. Another fun fact is that there's actually more riders coming from Tampa to St. Pete than vice versa. The Dietrich waterborne transit study that you may be familiar with from Ford Pinellas and the Chamber found that more than 83% of their respondents to the survey showed that they would very likely or somewhat likely use waterborne transit connecting Tampa and St. Pete. Question 2. So we have this information about the visitors who use the ferry service and the connection to events. And that's great, but this doesn't seem like it's a pure commuter service. Well, it runs Thursday through Sunday, mostly evening and weekend trips, so it's not a commuter service. But those of you who have seen the studies and who are on Forward Pinellas, you may also be familiar with the fact that only 16% of the trips on Tampa Bay roads are actually used exclusively for commuting to work. The success of transit is to provide a unique transportation option that integrates two major urban centers, two major public transit agency systems. It connects the region, it highlights our regional identity, and it really highlights the importance of having reliable transportation options. People without cars can use the ferry. People who do have cars can bypass the slowdown bottlenecks on the bridge and avoid the expense and time of trying to find parking. This service, when done right, is the foundation to growing waterborne transit for Pinellas County as well as the region. So question number 3, well, what if HART doesn't approve? PSTA will still continue with the RFP, but we will require the private vendors to provide their own boats. This will increase the cost and increase the subsidies that the municipalities will have to pay. The federal grant will lapse and it will go back to the federal government. It will go back to FTA and the money would be redistributed to another area in another region in the country that has ferry services. It doesn't go back to a pot of money to pay down our $37 trillion deficit. If it lapses and goes back, it'll go to Seattle, Boston, Charleston. Question number 4, what if FTA does not approve the transfer? That's right, it's not just a matter of Hart signing it over to us and plop, it goes into our checking account. Sorry, Debbie. FTA, who we have communicated with on a regular basis about this, FTA needs to see a letter from Hart indicating that they are transferring sponsorship of the grant to PSTA and that PSTA will accept it. It then goes up the chain to USDOT and comes back down to the FTA. Being scrutinized, the project being scrutinized, it's a competitive grant originally, being scrutinized every step of the way before it would be released to PSTA. If for some reason it doesn't go through, there's no harm to Hart or PSTA, no negative impact to us going through these steps to try to get these funds. Question 5, is there increased liability to PSTA? PSTA's contracted operator will bear the responsibility of the liability for the ferry operation, and it is written into the contract. And this is a contract that you will have the opportunity to see and review and scrutinize before approval. And this is just what PSTA has always done, it's what we have years and a lot of experience doing with our contracted third-party operations, whether it's Jolly Trolley, the Clearwater Ferry, our contracts with Transdev or Uber and Lyft. And I would imagine it's pretty similar to the third-party contracts that your home governments negotiate as well. This is something that we're very used to doing. Question number 6, is there increased liability to taxpayers? So transferring this grant to PSTA allows PSTA to purchase the boats, to lower subsidies and lower cost. What's more, as we heard earlier from Debbie, PSTA can capture those ridership numbers and get the credit that comes back to us in an annual fund for capital expenses. And that comes from, those funds come from an existing federal program. Question 7, what if the service is canceled or what if the boats fail? Well, PSTA can sell the boats. We would pay the proceeds that we would owe back to FTA, to the feds, and we would incur no cost. The contractor, again, the contractor is responsible for maintenance and holds the liability to keep the boat in Coast Guard regulation, safe and working condition. The annual capital funds captured from the ridership establishes a cash flow which can then be invested in part to help grow waterborne transit services. Last question, is this worth it? Is this our why? Is this our core mission? Well, PSTA's mission is to safely connect people to places. The intercity Cross Bay Ferry service provides this type of connectivity. It integrates into 2 major transit agency services. It integrates 2 major urban centers of St. Petersburg and Tampa, reduces road traffic, reduces the need for parking, and as I said earlier, it's a transit choice where people can bypass the traffic on the bridges. Buses can't travel over water, but ferries can. And we don't have to build roads or expand roads or build new bridges or expand bridges for capacity. That, by the way, is why FDOT loves this. It's a way to increase capacity without all the funds going into building more roads. So the 4.8 million, that's a lot of money in and of itself. But compared to the cost of building more bridges or roads, this 5 million towards a ferry vessel really does a lot of flex in terms of the choices and opportunities that we can provide the Tampa Bay region. The pilot service, customer surveys, and the waterborne transit regional market study also show very strong support for waterborne transit. The transfer of this grant from HART to PSTA, I think looks good for everybody. And it demonstrates to FTA that we are a region where all stakeholders are sharing direction, alignment, and commitment to regional transit projects. This system and this ferry system and this federal grant transfer, it will benefit both sides of the bay, it will reduce costs to both sides, and we'll get that annual transit ridership credit back. So this is an action item for your committee to recommend to the full board on May 28th to accept the $4.8 million ferry boat grant if HART approves the transfer, and to use it as intended to purchase 1 or 2 vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Darden. Before we open to questions, I have one real quick one. Talking about the FTA mileage money, for lack of a better word, has anybody plugged in the existing ridership miles to kind of get a benchmark as to where we would be based on, if nothing got any better? Or is the same miles being used by the Cross Bay Ferry, what would that do to impact our FTA money? And then we can kind of judge from there where it's going.
Yes, we have done that. Our grants manager has taken a look at it, and it would bring in about $1 million.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? Commissioner Albritton?
Yeah, I thought Hart was gonna vote last month on this. They put it off?
They did. They wanted PSTA to take this sort of ceremonial vote first. And then they plan on voting this on June 2nd.
Oh, okay, good.
Any additional questions? Mayor Petrillo?
So it seems to me that the success of this program would be predicated on getting 2 boats. I hate to say it, but that $4.8 million, I don't think that's gonna get us there. So what are your thoughts and what's the approach on that? Have you guys actually gone out and gotten estimated prices for 2 boats?
We've talked to a number of different operators and priced out the cost of the ferry boat that's been operating in that area. And like I mentioned, you're exactly correct, Commissioner Walker, that we probably would not be able to get 2 new ferry boats like the one that has been operating there within that amount of money. And I do not want to spend any more than that. So that's why it would require us to get used boats, at least one of them to be used to get the price down on a used vessel. But that is eligible under the grant to get used ferry boats. So that would be the first phase of the RFP. It's for the contractor to go find and acquire 1 or 2 used boats.
Okay, well, so that's the mitigation strategy is okay, that $4.8 million only buys 1 boat, then the RFP will specify that the contractor would need to bring another boat.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Commissioner Walker, I would also add that I think that there's going to be a lot of interest. We already know so far there's a lot of interest in this RFP. And so as we attract vendors who are interested that may already own a boat, then that would be an advantage to confer to those who may have a boat to bring to it in the first place. And then our funds would enable purchasing that second vehicle, vessel.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah, so just to confirm or to clarify that the current Cross Bay service those numbers are actual, right? Total ferry hours, ridership,
Yes. Yes.
okay. And then basically the possible scenario then, and I'm looking at slide 5, is based on really an extrapolation.
Right. Exactly.
And just another question related to that, regarding the demand part of this equation. So I like the current number of 60,000. But have there been any surveys done that would actually indicate that, the demand is high enough to make this a viable project?
Commissioner Walker, I would refer you to the Diedrich RPM waterborne transit study. It's called the Regional Market Demand Study that was released in January, and that was a study that was commissioned by Forward Pinellas and the St. Pete Chamber of Commerce. And there's some very good information in there that that shows that I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for waterborne transit.
Okay, and last question, let me get to that slide. So, and then maybe if this needs to be answered offline, I don't want to take a lot of time away from this, but the ridership, the submission of the ridership data to generate federal formula capital funds. How does that program work? Is it essentially a guarantee that basically we would get money back from the feds based on increased ridership?
Commissioner Walker, I mean, I don't think in Washington DC today, there's nothing that's, I would say, completely guaranteed, but this is pretty close to it. I will say, this program has been in place for 30 some years. The formula has been the same for 30 some years. Every transit system in the United States relies on these annual formula dollars to keep their programs going. And Congress has been incredibly supportive. This has not come out of the general fund of the US Congress. This comes out of the Highway Trust Fund, the portion, the gas tax portion of the DOT. And even President Trump's proposed budget to Congress that he just submitted made no cuts to this program. So it's as sure as anything could be in the federal level, I would say.
No, that's fair. But just one comment then, basically, this project, in my opinion, comes, with a little bit of risk. And if one of the mitigations for that risk, and in the event the program fails, we are not gonna get full repayment by selling the boats. We're gonna be taking a loss on those. Just to, provide at least, one of the potential risks of this. So, thank you.
Commissioner, or Mayor Petrillo, you had a question?
Yeah, more comments than questions. So looking at the entire proposal, I'm gonna start poking some holes into your presuppositions because I don't think that they're accurate and they may not hold water. So starting with, you have a statement here that the pilot service has been a success and shows strong support. I agree with you in the strong support because people do like it. Clearly hasn't been a success because if it was a success, the service would continue and the vendor would continue with the service. So looking at the ridership numbers, you have 70% local, 60% visitors, 16% of people using it for work trips, which I would imagine is probably just the people working on the boat that are using it for work trips, because it's
Mayor.
16% of Tampa Bay traffic on roadways is for commuters.
okay. So there's a difference between this and everything else that we do, right? Everything else that the PSTA does, in fact, any public transport is to provide access and transport for people that may not have other means of getting from one place to the other, right? This is a fun excursion, this is not a must-have, right? This is a nice to have. No one actually needs this for work, no one needs this to get from one end to the other. If I, for example, were to take the Cross Bay Ferry, I would have to get an Uber to downtown or park downtown, which really, looking at most of the people that use the ferry, they all park downtown. They either park at the Westin in downtown Tampa, or they park in one of the parking garages or at the pier, right? So they're getting there, so we're not eliminating the downtown traffic on either side. We're either gonna get there by car, with our own cars and park, so we're not eliminating the issue with parking. And then we still have to get there by Uber for not parking because we're gonna do a lightning game.
Don't forget the Sunrunner.
I mean, we know what the ridership on the Sunrunner, so we know that doesn't hold water either, right? And so now we've not eliminated parking, we've not eliminated traffic, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm simply saying if we're gonna be doing this, let's be honest about what it is. And it is not a must-have, it is a nice-to-have, right? So if we're gonna say that, hey, we're gonna use this so we get an extra $1 million from the feds, I might be behind you on that one. But if we're gonna use it and say, hey, it's gonna do all these other things that and most likely it's not going to do. And then really the other part is, if this is a nice to have, then it shouldn't be part of the public service part, but rather should the private enterprise part, right? Some business should come in and say, hey, this is a great opportunity. If it is such a great opportunity, then we should have a line out the door of businesses and ferry companies saying, we wanna bid on this route, and we're gonna pay you to man this route, not the other way around. So has it been a success? I don't think so, because Hart's been paying the ferry company to run the thing rather than the other way around. Versus if it was a great business opportunity, right? We should have ferry companies from here to Seattle and Boston lining up and say, hey, how can we bid on this route? How can we pay you, right, to run this rather than us having to subsidize them? And so I don't see the people that are riding the ferry, they're not connecting to the Sunrunner, they're not connecting to Hart, right? These are joyriders, right? They wanna go to brunch on Sunday in downtown St. Pete, they wanna go to a lightning game, right? That's what it is. And so I think if we're looking at it from that perspective, right, then that puts this whole thing in another, and then the next thing is, to Commissioner Walker's point, we're not gonna cover the boats with the grant, and then we're looking at old boats. That's gonna bring its own issues with maintenance, and yes, we may say, hey, the vendor's responsible for it. You know, but we buy them a 10-year-old boat, how long before they're gonna get sick and tired of $100,000-$200,000 a year in maintenance costs, right? And then they're gonna be fuel inefficient, right? So I'm not sure that just taking the money because it's there, and if we don't use it, somebody else will get it. But if somebody else has a better business case for it, then they should have it. They should take it and run with it and make it happen. But if we can't make a business case for it, because it's not a must-have, right? It doesn't serve, you know, a disenfranchised community. It doesn't get somebody from point A to point B that doesn't have any other means. I can get from my house to downtown Tampa in 40 minutes, and if I was taking the Cross Bay Ferry, it would take me an hour and a half between having to go to downtown and then find parking and then walk to the ferry and then take the ferry, right? So again, we need to be honest about what it is and what it does, and then figure out if it fits into it. But not have, you know, a long list of things that, you know, look good on paper but may not actually work out in reality.
Thank you. Commissioner Hazelton, you had a question?
Well, it kind of changed a little bit based on something that Mayor Petrillo just said, which is to recognize and I've known this for years, the PSTA and probably other transit agencies, to recognize the seeking choice riders, people who have a choice because they have a car and they have other means of transportation. So, you know, I've seen this agency over the years try to come up with other ideas because we've apparently tapped the people who simply need a ride, which my feeling is that's what we're supposed to be doing, is serving the people who don't have other means of transportation and not be out here seeking the choice riders. And I mean, that's, I've always felt that way, obviously. That's, I don't think there's enough money coming from the taxpayers. I mean, when you look at the subsidies of the capital budget, which is 99%, the operating budget, which is 93%, arguably, I would say it's more like 95%. So everything we're doing is subsidized by taxpayers counting on us to be careful with their tax dollars. And we continue to be out here seeking people who really are not interested in parking their car every day and riding these types of, you know, because they have a choice. So I don't know that there's enough money in the world to change people's mind of their choice.
I'll disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I don't wanna get into a debate.
No, that's not the debate. I'm simply saying that we're talking about the principles of why we're doing this, right? I think there is demand for it. I 100% think there's demand for it, right? And just having lived in both downtowns myself, next to the ferry, and having ridden it, and talking to people that live there, there definitely is demand. I don't think the issue is demand. I think the issue is, why is PSTA taking it on?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Hart clearly doesn't want it, and because it's a joyride and not a must-have, it should go to the private sector. And if they can make it work on money, let them make it work on money, and then it'll fail or it'll succeed, just like any other business in the United States, based on the demand and based on the quality of service that they provide. And if they can make it work, buy their own boats, lease boats,
Yeah, I think it's a
charge
private
whatever
sector.
fare they want. I think the demand is there, it's just whether we should be tackling it on top of everything else. And there's additional costs to this that we're not even factoring here, right? Even though we're saying we're not the ones running it, we are the ones managing it, right? So we're still allocating staff resources, you know, to supervising the vendor, you know, making sure that they have their insurance paperwork, making sure that they're doing the regular maintenance. So whatever, you know, those are not free, right? Those are still hard costs to the PSTA that we're adding to our, you know, whether we can utilize existing staff, most likely, but we're still going to be eating up, you know, their allowable hours any given week by having to deal with one more service.
Any additional questions? Oh, Commissioner McCann?
Yeah, I wanna start by trying to clarify something that Commissioner Walker brought up. If we go forward, we purchase one or two vessels and then the service fails in 5 years and we sell the vessels and return the proceeds of the sale to the feds, is PSTA on the hook for the difference in the amount of the grant versus the then existing cost of or value of the vessels? Or do we just return what the proceeds of the sale were?
We were required to return the proceeds of the sale, and the FTA does calculate the value of the vessels based on what they paid. So the depreciated value, and even if it's a used boat, they will allow you to factor that in, so that the amount that you owe the feds goes down as the program goes along.
Okay, so we would just pay the proceeds of the sale of the vessels to the feds
Yes.
at that point. Okay, so here's my thinking on this. the kind of big picture things that matter to me is grant can only be used for vessels. If we don't use it, it goes to another city. It's not gonna cost PSTA anything to purchase the vessels or to operate the vessels. A little bit of staff time, that's a great point. Tampa and St. Pete are gonna cover the operating expenses of this. The operator is liable for maintenance, civil liability, staffing expenses. So I do think this would reduce car trips, even if you're just viewing this as a recreational service, and I think there's a lot of value in that, especially if St. Pete can move the dock back to the Vinoy Basin. So at the end of the day, it comes down to me, do we want Tampa Bay to have 2 new or used ferry vessels, or do we want Seattle to have that? And do we want Tampa Bay to have about $1 million in formula funds, or do we want Seattle to have that? I don't think that PSTA is limited to being a transit provider of last resort. I think one of the best things we can do is to contribute to a vibrant transportation network where people have choices in how they get around. So I'm supportive of this. It seems like there's no downside to PSTA and no downside to Pinellas County. If people think it's a bad idea for St. Pete and for Tampa, let their representatives make that decision for them. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Freak Sanders?
I know I'm not a member of this committee, but I do wanna kind of comment on a couple of things that I heard. As far as the transparency of the presentation, I think Darden did a great job, especially in representing the fact that only 16% of Tampa Bay uses it for work trips. So if only 16% uses it for work trips, it was very clear that the majority is not for work. So that point was made. When we speak about only providing a service for those that need it, then there would be no chance for revenue if that was the only service that we provided, or for those that need it, because that's a subsidy in itself. And PSTA is limiting its opportunities for revenue generating projects such as this. I do appreciate the clarification that Commissioner McCann just asked in regards to the 4.8, and if we have to resell the vessels, what that looks like for PSTA. So that was clarified for me as well. One of the goals that I think that we've had regionally is to provide regional transportation. I actually sat on T-BARTA, but to provide multimodal opportunities for not only our residents, but our tourists. And we have to remember that a lot of our tourists bring a lot of dollars to Pinellas County. So whether it be entertainment, whether it be work-related, dollars are dollars. And so I don't want us to miss the option of letting our area be a main attraction, because we actually, not too many organizations, not too many people have the opportunity to ride ferries. You know, we're providing an experience. We're providing an option. As you say, we have choices. So with the risk being reasonably mitigated for PSTA, I just don't want us to forget that Tampa did not do it because it failed, because the original ferry provider changed boats. It wasn't that it failed, they changed boats, and that was the issue why Tampa did not continue its contract, because a slower boat would reduce ridership, which would reduce revenue. So they didn't do it because it didn't succeed, they did it because the provider wanted to change their vessel that they were providing. So initially going into this, I thought it was a feasible and a good idea for PSTA. And then you have to look at the bigger understanding, because those of us that deal with legislators know that sometimes when you turn dollars back, when you return dollars, you have a really hard time getting it back. You know, because now you're known, and I'm not saying just take it because it's there, but because the opportunity provides us a wider visibility in regards to being a multimodal location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
This is, we're gonna vote on this action
Yes.
item, whether or not to recommend it. The slideshow that you had, that showed a subsidy, is that part of what we're recommending on a
No.
budget?
And that was just a hypothetical.
And this, it says use the grant to purchase vessels. I would like that to be conditioned on us. I don't wanna buy the vessels if we can't get a contract with a provider that guarantees that we don't have to subsidize the route. And so could we make a motion to amend that to, we do not buy the vessels unless we have a no-cost operator in place first? Is that?
Is that a-
No cost to PSTA? Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
see, I'm not opposed to this as long as it doesn't cost us any money, and that's the big sell for me, cause I do think it's an attraction. I think it's good for the community. I really just think it's, people like it, and I think people do go downtown to use it. They'll take an Uber to so I wanna make sure that we do not purchase the vessels unless we have a contract in place that doesn't cost us any money, and so.
So you could amend the second bullet there, use as intended to purchase the vessels and then subject to the private operator, subject there be no subsidies from PSTA.
That would be good, yeah,
So do that.
to the operator.
We have to take a
The
formal
PSTA
vote
would
on
not
the
provide
change in
any
the language?
subsidies, yeah.
Do we have to take a formal vote on the suggested change in the language before we vote on to recommend approval?
No,
Yeah, was
Yeah, I would think that would be a motion, I would like to make a motion
Is that a
that
motion? Okay,
that
we have a
we-
motion on the floor, is there a second?
we alter the action item. We purchase the vessels. We will not purchase the vessels unless we have a no-cost contractor with a service provider in place.
No cost to PSTA.
Yes.
But wait a minute,
Second,
wait a minute.
oh, sorry.
Where does the accepting the grant come in then?
that would be part of it, that we would accept the grant
Only if,
Conditions on.
yeah,
and then we would only, we would
Right
only
now it says
purchase the
accept
boat, we would
grant.
only purchase the vessels, we would accept the grant. And the way it logistically would probably work is we would accept the grant, Hart would transfer it, and then if somehow we were not able to find a vendor that could not guarantee that there's no cost to PSTA, which I don't think is likely. But if that would happen, we would just not use the grant, we would not get the boats. And then we would give the money back to
Right,
the
that's why I want it in
That's
there,
what I want.
that's what I'm recommending.
that it would be returned, then
Yeah.
it would be.
Right.
So we have a motion on the floor to change the language to Commissioner Scherr's suggestion. I think I understood somebody over there has written it down, is that correct? Do we have a second to change the language?
Let's read it.
I got a question real, sorry.
Where's hand is up?
When does the grant lapse?
2027? 2027.
Thanks for stopping. Coming by.
And I just want to add a comment to that. But having a contractor on board might actually facilitate PSTA's ability to procure those boats.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a first, we have a second on the suggested language change. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Second, aye.
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 Opposed? You opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, to change the language.
Oh, no, I'm in acceptance of that,
Okay.
yes, sorry.
Any more questions? Because we're running up against hard stops for a lot of people.
Did we get the vote from Commissioner Walker?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, any additional questions? Okay. Moving on, we need to have a motion from the Finance Committee to recommend acceptance of the transfer of the funds to purchase up to 2 vessels. I need a motion.
So moved.
I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
I'm opposed.
I'm a aye, yes, by the way. I was a no in the executive committee a week or so ago. I feel that my concerns have been adequately addressed, and I thank you for that, so I'm a yes on this.
Mr. Chair, I had a hard stop, but with the mayor leaving, I'm alive again, so
I
we'll lose our
understand.
quorum if I go, so I don't
Well,
wanna.
thank you for coming in, and I'm actually gonna be passing the gavel to our vice chair, cause I'm up on a hard stop as well.
Does that mean you vote?
I did on that one, cause we lost, I had to step in, it became live on.
So we've passed it.
was on the planning committee.
Mayor Petrilla's on the
Oh,
planning.
okay, I lost it, I'm sorry. So we still have it without, if I go, we still have our finance quorum, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm leaving too. I've got a hard stop.
Let's go.
What's that? So anyway, we've addressed 4B, the passenger ferry. The motion carried, correct? So thank you to the planning committee members who are here. We're just gonna continue on with finance committee only business, but you're more than welcome to stay for the fun. Thank you for coming.
Are there any more votes on the finance side?
Yeah, there's quite a few.
If we both leave, we lose the quorum.
Yeah.
No, there's still
We'd have three, we'd have
There's still
Commissioner
three.
Hazelton,
McCann
Max and Commissioner Share.
and Shearer.
Yeah.
Okay, good, I feel better. I didn't wanna cause that
Can
problem.
you handle it? Move, take it over from there. I passed the gavel.
Where are we
4C.
at?
4C.
Or C.
I apologize, folks. It ran longer than I expected.
This is not an action item though, right?
Yeah,
Oh, these are all action
The remaining is all action items in this report, so. Thank you, everybody. Sorry I have to
Yeah,
No
get up
problem.
and hand the gavel off.
All right.
See you later. Take care.
We can push the informational items, yeah.
So we're good.
Oh, we,
Oh my goodness.
slide down.
Alright. Wow, there's a lot here, there's a lot here. And so my problem is I forgot my glasses. However, this is big time. So if anybody's got a spare reader glasses,
I think I do.
well, there's always somebody in the crowd that has a spare pair.
I tried these.
Okay,
I don't know if they're the right number.
So some of us have
How about these?
that's a no.
How about these?
Right, and I don't even know if they're.
Yeah, this works.
Okay, great.
Thank you, everybody.
Did you print the report for?
Okay, so we're at 4C, Al Burns, Director of Procurement, is back to present the contract for auditing services. Al?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. I'll be very, very brief. The action item that I'm bringing to you is the action is recommend approval of a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for auditing services with Clifton Larson Allen LLP for a total contract amount not to exceed $375,000 and authorize the CEO to exercise 2 one-year options. Just as a friendly reminder, this contract is to provide annual year-end financial audit and related services for the upcoming fiscal years of 25, 26, 27, and the option years. We've gone through an extensive process, and I just wanna thank all of you that are here for your patience with me while we went through it. We followed the Florida statute 218.391 to the letter. In February, we established the evaluation criteria. Later that month, we released the RFP. In March, we received 2 proposals. In April, you guys evaluated, the finance committee members evaluated the proposals. The scores are in your packet. The fiscal impact, there's a table in there that tells you the fiscal impact over the course of the years of the contract. And once again, the recommendation that I bring before you is recommend approval of a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for auditing services with Clifton Larson Allen LLP for a total contract amount not to exceed $375,000 and authorize the CEO to exercise the 2 one-year options. Madam Chair, I just want to acknowledge my Deputy Director, Mr. David Hensler. He was the contracting officer for this solicitation, and he did an impeccable job along with staff. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
You said,
Yeah, I'm an aye too. Motion